you're thinking about living in the San Francisco Bay Area, today is an excellent episode for you because we're going to do an overview of the Bay Area. So, talk about 5 different regions, compare things like traffic, weather, a little bit about schools, lifestyle, and cultural differences between the different parts of the Bay because it's pretty big and there's a lot to take in. Whether or not you already live in the Bay Area, hopefully this episode is beneficial to you so you can learn more about another area you know less about. I'm Andrea West. I'm a Bay Area native and I've been a realtor since 2010. I'm originally from the North Bay, which up in Marin County in a lovely town called Novato, where I lived from my late 20s and I started my career and bought my first home. Then I moved to San Francisco and we lived in the Nopa district, which is right in the middle of the city, for 8 awesome years. I loved everything about living in the city. And then we decided it was time to check out the East Bay. And in 2019, we bought our family compound in Alameda, which is where we live now. So I know Bay Area real estate from both sides of the bridge. Whether you're looking for something a little more suburban, a little more urban, or something in between, I got you. Give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. I would love to connect with you. You can also book a Zoom with me. My QR code is in the banner. The San Francisco Bay Area's reputation precedes itself. Tons of iconic landmarks, amazing cultural and ethnic diversity, a booming tech and professional community, as well as one of the international trade ports and hubs, in addition to housing military, agriculture. Tons of different industries come in and out of the San Francisco Bay Area. So when you think of things like Alcatraz Island, the Golden Gate Bridge, wine country, Fisherman's Wharf, Chinatown, the Academy of Sciences, SF MoMA, the De Young Museum, Coit Tower, the Zoo, Crooked Lombard Street, Mount Tamalpais, Samuel P. Taylor Park, the beautiful beaches. The list goes on. There are so many things that people think of when they come to the Bay Area, and there is no shortage of things to do, amazing foods to be had, incredible wines to drink, and wonderful adventures and activities that you can take all right at your fingertips in the Bay. Not to mention the Bay Area is centrally located, getting to lots of other parts of California and surrounding areas. So getting to somewhere like Tahoe or Los Angeles or Joshua Tree or up to Eureka or even up into Oregon for even just a long weekend are all possible even just by driving your car. So come check out all the great things the Bay Area has to offer and see where might be a good fit for you. All right, let's break down the Bay Area with our color-coded map here. Starting right here in the heart of it all is the city and county of San Francisco. Right below that, we've got the peninsula, which is San Mateo County here in green and a little bit of Santa Clara County here in yellow. After that, you've got the South Bay, which is the rest of Santa Clara County here. Over here, you've got the East Bay, which is Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And then the North Bay, which is Solano, Napa, Sonoma, and Marin counties. The total landmass for the Bay Area is around 7,000 square miles, and we've got about 7,756,000 people living here. The most densely populated part of the Bay is, you guessed it, the city and county of San Francisco right in the middle. Now, San Francisco is only about 47 square miles and has a population of around 874,000 people. The next densely populated part of the Bay Area is the East Bay. The East Bay is around 1,455 square miles and has a population of around 2.8 million people between Contra Costa and Alameda counties. After that, the South Bay is the next most densely populated, around 1,300 square miles, and a population of around 1,886,000 people. The peninsula, after that, is right around 744 square miles and has a population of around 738,000 people. Now, the North Bay is the largest landmass, around 4,291 square miles, and the least densely populated at 1,334,000 people. So give an overview of the population and density for each of these areas. That being said, something for everybody here. You've got small towns, big cities, suburbs, agriculture, and everything in between. Now that we know where we are a little more densely populated and a little less densely populated, A lot of people might be asking, well, what are people doing for work here? Well, it's probably not news to you that tech is one of our biggest industries in the Bay Area, but it's not the only industry by any means. We've got tons of retail, biopharma, finance, agriculture, everything from wineries and breweries to produce and livestock. We've got Clover Stornetta, which is one of the biggest dairy farms in California, and they have really fun signs, by the way. We've got a booming music industry. There's lots of film and art here, tons of culture, and huge diversity throughout the Bay Area. Depending on what you enjoy for your style of living and proximity to maybe where you're commuting, a lot of these things can play into where you end up wanting to live. So other than terrain, the next thing I like to talk about when we're talking about the difference in the Bay Area is the difference in weather, because weather really does make a difference. Now, San Francisco has got to be one of the cooler, more temperate climate areas of the Bay Area. And that's just because of its location. Now, you can see we've obviously got this big, beautiful coast that runs down along California. So everything closer to the coast, everything further out west is going to be a lot cooler than everything further out east. The further you are from the coast, the warmer it's going to get, generally speaking. Now, the bay right here in the middle does help cool things down. So if you're kind of along this bay rim, it will be cooler than, say, even 10 miles more inland. But it's not going to be as cool as out here it is along the actual ocean. That being said, San Francisco is notorious for the fog. We call him Carl. He comes and goes. It's actually worse in the summer. Fun little fact if you don't know that. So when you're thinking about cooler temperatures, not as much of the hot days, intermittent sun here and there, depending on where you're living in San Francisco, this is a great place to live. San Francisco probably reaches the highs in the 80s at most summers, and that's only really a very few days. Most of the highs in the summers are in the 70s. If you hit over 90 in San Francisco, you can guarantee it is super hot in the rest of the Bay, especially further inland. Now, these areas along here, kind of past Walnut Creek, out in Contra Costa, past like Dublin Pleasanton, out in Alameda, getting closer to like Tracy and Livermore, Alamo, up here closer to Vacaville, and then up here into wine country. And then down here into San Jose. Once you're getting out in those areas, you really can hit over 100 degrees a few times throughout the year, if not several times, depending on a heat wave, depending on where you are located, if you're in the valley or if you're on a hill. It can get very hot, which is one of the reasons agriculture is so great here. It's really great for crops and produce, but obviously it's super hot out there, so it may not be ideal if you don't enjoy heat and really warm weather. California is generally a dry heat. It's not going to be as dry as it is in the valley, like Fresno or down in Joshua Tree, but it's going to be a lot less humid than somewhere like the East Coast, like Washington, D.C., New York, or and that whole New England area where it's quite humid. So just for comparison, we don't really get the humidity out here that they get on the East Coast. We also don't get snow out here, not at least in our part of California, not in the Bay Area. Very occasionally we'll get hail, and I think once it did technically snow a few winters back, but it basically just melted the second it hit the ground. It was kind of laughable, but very fun for us to all get excited about snow. Bay Area weather's pretty temperate. In the winter, it definitely can get freezing temperatures the further away from the ocean that you get, so further inland. There were mornings where I'd have to go scrape ice off my windshield, and I was raised up here in Novato, and that happens. The East Bay, I haven't had it as much because I'm kind of the inner rim of the East Bay, but definitely can happen where you're getting further inland because those temperatures really drop at night. Same down here in San Jose. And that's super common as well. So when you're thinking about what you like in weather, you might also be asking yourself, well, what is it like to be getting around these places? Because if I'm living really hot out here in deep East Bay, I'm probably going to want to escape the heat and come in somewhere cooler on those really hot days. Or you're thinking, well, I'm probably commuting in and out of an office 2 or 3 days a week. And most offices and most of the tech, finance, retail sector tend to be in San Francisco. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. So let's talk a little bit about commuting in and out of some of the more popular areas to commute to. So right down here in the Embarcadero, we call this the financial district. This whole area, kind of right in here, is where a lot of those high rises are. So the Salesforce Tower, the Transamerica building, tons of other really big skyscrapers are down here as well, both residential and commercial. But for the sake of conversation and commuting, we're talking commercial right now. So most people are getting in and out of here. So how are people getting here? Well, for starters, you can do the obvious. You can sit in a lot of traffic and you can drive. So if you're coming from the South Bay, you've got 280 and 101 that kind of take you on up here to connect into the city. If you're coming from the North Bay, you're going to take the beautiful Golden Gate Bridge to get across. And if you're coming from the East Bay, you're going to take the Bay Bridge to get across. The San Mateo and Dumbarton bridges down here will connect to the East Bay into the peninsula. And if you work in Silicon Valley, that's hugely important because a lot of people do work down here in Palo Alto. And that's why Fremont and Union City are particularly popular for people who work down here in the tech sector and want to commute over. So that's one way to commute down into Silicon Valley is driving. Chances are if you work for tech, though, you're also going to have a shuttle stop. So the shuttle stops are sprinkled all throughout the Bay Area, lots of neighborhoods. Check with your employer for that kind of info. All right, back to the financial district, getting out in and out of there. Parking down here is atrocious. It is incredibly expensive and a pain in the butt to get. Don't park on the street, you will get towed. I don't care if the sign doesn't look like it says you're gonna get towed, you're gonna get towed, just don't do it. It's not worth it. It's so expensive to park. So if you're like me and you have to have a car for work, sorry, Charlie, you're paying for it. But if you don't have to, and you don't wanna sit in traffic all day, because trust me, when you sit in traffic, it can definitely double your commute. Then let's check out some of these public transit options. So one of the first ways to get around that we talk about is called BART. It stands for Bay Area Rapid Transit. And you can see here in the white is the outline of the Bay. And then here is the map for BART. Now BART is really good at connecting the East Bay over to San Francisco. And recently they just added this Berryessa San Jose station a few years back. So it does help connecting the South Bay up into San Francisco. It goes to the tip of the peninsula over here in Millbrae, but it doesn't quite get down into San Mateo or Burlingame or Palo Alto or Foster City. So if you live down there and you work up here, you're going to want to utilize a different train. Great. So if you live in the South Bay or the peninsula and you are commuting to San Francisco, Caltrain is an excellent option for you. It is going to connect you from all the way down here in Gilroy, go up through Morgan Hill, go up through San Jose, up through the rest of the peninsula, through Silicon Valley, and then it's going to take you up into San Francisco and downtown. So it's a great way to get in and out of the city without having to drive along the peninsula. If you are coming from up in the North Bay, like up in Solano, if you're coming from, to show you, coming from up in here, Vacaville, Davis area. Here is the train for Capitol Corridor from up in Solano County, up kind of closer to Davis. It'll take you actually even from Sacramento area, and it connects through Vacaville down through the East Bay, and then you can take a connector over to San Francisco, and it will connect you on down into San Jose. Now the train is long, it doesn't run super frequent. Check out the schedule, but it's really good to have there. Another way you can plan is you can take Amtrak. I believe the Capitol Corridor and Amtrak are overlapping with one another, but this will also show you can take from Stockton, Modesto if you choose to live out in the valley more, because a lot of people do. A lot of people live in Stockton and commute into parts of the Bay Area for work, especially post-COVID, because people are only in the office a few days a week now. And if you decide to live in the beautiful city of San Francisco, here is just a rough Muni map, and you can check out the SFMTA for more info on that. San Francisco is very well integrated with the trains and the buses above and below ground. So a lot of them run in tandem along Market Street with BART on a different, on a different level, but a lot of the similar overlap in routes, and then it branches out much better into the rest of the city. So most people have really good public transit options throughout San Francisco. And San Francisco itself is actually a really convenient city to get around. I lived there for 8 years, and I used to have to commute In and around the city, my favorite way to get around was biking because I found I didn't have to rely on a car. I could get in and out of traffic and neighborhoods a lot quicker, and I didn't have to pay for parking. It was great. I loved it. Highly recommend finding alternative ways to get around the city that aren't driving, and always great to find good ways to get in and around San Francisco and other urban areas without having to drive, because parking and traffic are really, truly very difficult in the Bay Area. One of my favorite ways to get around, if I can do it, is taking the ferry. I love me a good boat ride. I love the ferry. Get a cup of coffee in the morning, have a nice beer or a soda or something on the way home, and enjoy the views, enjoy the fresh air. And it's such a nice leisurely ride. And it's actually still pretty quick. For example, if you were to take a direct from Alameda or Oakland, or from over here, Harbor Bay and Alameda, I think it's about 20 or 25 minutes door to door from downtown to the ferry terminal. Now, for example, if you're coming from Oakland or Alameda, they do this on the way there, on the way back. One way is a little bit longer, one way is a little bit shorter, sort of thing. So that's why I say it depends. Vallejo is going to be a much longer boat ride, but still it's not too bad considering it would also be a much longer drive or a much longer BART ride. So comparatively, they're actually really good options. They don't really add any commute time to your commuting. Just pay attention to the trains and the boats to compare, because schedules do change. Up in Marin, we didn't talk about much up there because they don't really have any trains up there. They do have a public bus system called Golden Gate Transit, which is great. But if you're on a bus, you're still subject to the street traffic. So if there's a backup, if there's an accident, you're going to get stuck in it. Another reason I love the ferry, you're not subject to any of that. So you can come out of Larkspur, you can come out of Tiburon, Belvedere, and Sausalito, and then get you on into San Francisco here. So we really do utilize as many ways as we can to get in and around the Bay without having to drive. One last thing I will say about commuting. Depending on where you're living, there are areas that are very hard to get even around in without having a car. So say, for example, if you lived in Oakland or Berkeley or Alameda even, you could probably get away with not having a car. And you could get to and from San Francisco and to and from other parts of the East Bay and the Bay Area relatively well on a grand scale. However, if you lived in certain parts of the North Bay, say Novato, where I'm from, or up into Sonoma County or Napa County, or certain parts of up here into Solano County, if you don't have a car, it is really hard to get around because public transit in these areas is much more sparse. Things are more spread out. You can't really walk to where you need to go a lot of the time. So getting to and from the grocery store or going to get a bite to eat or a cup of coffee can be a much bigger commitment if you don't have a car. So most people in the suburbs or the outer areas, the more agriculture, rural, suburban, small town areas do end up having vehicles, versus people in the more urban areas, it's a little more mixed. So yeah, depending on where you are in the Bay Area, you may or may not need a car. Now, a lot of people ask me about schools in the Bay Area. I always point people to greatschools.org, and I'll tell you why. Because schools change a lot. Ratings change a lot. I've seen it change, especially through the pandemic. You know, I watch closely the schools in my neighborhood and in my city because that's where I'm planning on sending my kids one day. And they've changed just in the past few years. In my opinion, the Bay Area has got some amazing schools and some really good options. Check out greatschools.org. On that note, the Bay Area does schools in an interesting way. Not every city does it based on location. A lot of them do. But say, for example, San Francisco, it's actually a lottery-based system. So say you live out here in, I don't know, let's just say you live out here in the Sunset. Okay, you're out close to the beach. You want to go to your neighborhood elementary school out in the Sunset District. Well, you actually have to put yourself on a list for that, and you want to say it's one of your top schools that's your priority and you'd like to get into. Then you have to pick a few other as backups. And then the idea is then you put your name into the lottery, and certain things will get you more preference than others. And then hopefully you get one of your top schools. So you may be living out here closer to the beach. You may end up having to go to Noe Valley to go to school. And that happens a lot. And sometimes that's a school you wanted, and sometimes that was a school you didn't want quite as much. So definitely check out the San Francisco Unified School District for more information on the lottery system. Oakland as well has got a similar system too, and I believe they're going through some restructuring as well. And there are some really great pockets of amazing schools spread throughout the Bay Area, North Bay, East Bay, South Bay Peninsula, a lot of really good schools. So definitely check out greatschools.org if schools is something that's on your radar. People ask me all the time if it feels different living in one part of the Bay than another. Is it culturally any different? Absolutely. Of course it is. The Bay Area is a pretty big spread out spot. Politically speaking, the Bay Area is blue. The Bay Area is very liberal, and most counties and areas are very liberal or liberal leaning. Now, that's not to say that we don't have conservatives, we don't have Republicans. It's just that the majority of them are liberals, are more Democrats. That being said, there are parts that can feel more purple or actually even a little bit more red when you get into certain towns and certain areas of the Bay. So if you want to check out a political map, you can do that and you can see where some of those things will differ, because it really does make a big difference where you are in the Bay, politically speaking. Another thing, of course, you've got things like agriculture versus things like urban areas. So if you are more into going to museums, going out to clubs or bars or Michelin star restaurants and having nightlife and activities, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, these are going to be great areas for you to go and spend time. Even if you don't live there, tons of people all over the Bay are commuting and going in and out of these places for those things. And it influences the culture for sure. So somewhere like Berkeley, for example, being at the forefront of a lot of liberal movements is going to feel very different than maybe somewhere up in the North Bay where things are a lot quieter and a little less politically and socially charged to be making changes and making statements in that vein. These are just a few examples. Of course, just give you a little snippet of the areas. Of course, up here in the North Bay, you've got Sonoma and Napa. You've got the sister counties for wine culture. So you've got amazing wineries up here, big, beautiful hills, beautiful vineyards. The culture around that really embodies a lot of the rest of the county. So that means if you've got good wine, you gotta have good food, right? You would think. So you also have Michelin star restaurants, especially up in Napa, and you've got a lot of these really tasty cuisines and really just farm to table attitude around the food and around that style. So it's much more of that, much more centered around that agriculturally speaking, versus if you go out into like Solano, Contra Costa, and Alameda, there are some wineries out in, especially out here in Livermore, but it's also sprinkled with a lot more of fruits and vegetables and nuts. So you've got almonds and cherries and strawberries and peaches and apricots, and I can go on for days. We've got really amazing, tasty fruits right here in the Bay Area. It's really great. And yes, there are fruits and other orchards and livestock up in the North Bay too, but I'm speaking broad strokes. This is a little more wine heavy, and I would say this is a little more mixed agriculture, livestock between the two out in here. San Jose, Gilroy, and the South Bay, this is known for their garlic festival every year. So you've got garlic, you've got agriculture. Again, you've got lots of fruits and vegetables and livestock down here as well. The peninsula, there are some strawberries right over here in Half Moon Bay. I know you can go pick them, and I know there's some agriculture here along the coast, but the footprint and area of the peninsula is much smaller in comparison to the rest of the Bay Area and the regions. So we do see less of the agriculture down here. People ask a lot about the cost of living in the Bay Area and if it's different in different areas. Absolutely. So it is no secret. The Bay Area is expensive. Everywhere in the Bay Area is expensive. Finding a quote starter home under $800,000 is definitely possible, but it's not everywhere. So that's something I like to let people know. If your budget is kind of between 500 and 800 for a starter home, you have some really good options in a lot of the North Bay and parts of the East Bay. Um, Not everywhere, of course, but say for example, you were looking in Vacaville or Davis or Concord or Martinez or maybe San Jose or certain parts of Napa. You could definitely find some of those things for around 800 or less. If you want to be a little closer inland, more centrally located, generally speaking, single family homes are starting at 1 million plus. If you want to be a little bit closer inland to the bay, down in the peninsula and down into San Jose, single family homes are even higher than that, 1.5 and up from there. Some of these areas, the average cost of single family homes is $3 to $5 million. And of course, you can get a starter home for less than that. Things vary a lot when we're talking about how much a home costs. It's going to depend a lot on walkability, the neighborhood, crime, schools, public transit, how big the house is, the condition of the house. I mean, the list goes on, of course, but there are options. So if you're looking in the Bay Area and you want a single family home under $1 million, I've got tons of options to show you and talk to you about, just about finding the right fit for you. Well, to wrap it up, thank you so much for joining me today. The Bay Area is my home. I have been here my whole life. As I mentioned, I'm originally from Nevada, which is right up here. Lived in San Francisco for 8 years, which is right here. And now I live on this beautiful island of Alameda over here in the East Bay. And the Bay Area is just so wonderful. It's such a great mix of people and culture and diversity and just a fun mix of so many things to do. So if you're thinking about buying or selling in the Bay Area, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, book a Zoom with me. My QR code is in my banner. Anywhere you're ready to look in the Bay Area, I got you. I know Bay Area real estate from both sides of the bridge. Don't forget, your goals are my business. I hope to talk to you soon. Till next time.